Welcome back to Pottery. Today we're gonna make pie plates. So it's pie season, you know, Thanksgiving pies, Christmas pies, pies. We're making pies. This is not a pie plate, but this is where we're going to make a pie plate. And because I don't like just making a pie plate, this is gonna be special. This is gonna be a little diabolical. And I'm going to tell you a story that goes along with this. My ancestry goes back to Robert the Bruce. He's a Scottish warlord, basically. We're glossing over quite a bit of history. Anyway, some of our Bruce Stewart ancestors settled in Wyoming. One of those people was a woman named Annie Bruce, whose mother helped defend her in a court case where Annie was convicted of manslaughter, having fed a strychnine-laced pie to her father by packing it in his lunch. Her father was a dairy farmer. She packed it in his lunch, he died, and Annie, the 16-year-old, 15 or 16-year-old girl, was convicted of his murder. And it was a prune pie, I believe, or a plum pie, one of those. Annie was later exonerated, and now the thought is that her mother killed her father with the pie, and Annie took the fall for it, knowing that as a young girl she would be exonerated. Later, my family then moved to someplace in Idaho and to kind of get away from the rumors, is what I understood. So anyway, my ancestor was one of the first women, or the first woman convicted of manslaughter in Wyoming, which is a great skeleton to have in the closet. Pies in my family come with a lot of history, so we're gonna make some pie plates that say you have been poisoned on them. We're gonna use Laguna Speckled clay. This toasts up really nice, and it works really well for oven safe-ish products. So this will be fully, because it's got some grog in it, It'll also help soften up my hands. I've been throwing with porcelain, and they're real gross. And ooh, that smells delightfully bad, which means it's plastic and good to go. Here we go. I need 3 pounds. We're throwing 2 today, so 6 pounds out of my 25-pound block. Let's go. Probably more like this. Yeah, that's pretty close. Right there. Yeah, I like that. You'll need a sponge, a wooden rib, a needle tool, maybe a metal rib, water, wheel, and a hydrobat. A ruler. So we gotta throw to 9.5, 10 inches. The standard size of a pie plate is 9 inches. Because of shrinkage, we're gonna go almost to 10, because when a pie plate shrinks after you've made it, it actually shrinks more this way than it says it does. So overall, the shrinkage is like 12%. But when you make something wide and flat, or tall and skinny, or even tall and wide, the shrink rate changes kind of a little bit. And there's surely a mathematical reason for this. I'm sure it has to do something with thermodynamics. I don't really care. All I need to know is that it shrinks a little bit more when it's wide and flat. So the reason I want to use a hydrobat for this project is because hydrobats allow for, excuse me, I need the pedal to move. Okay, hydrobats allow for even drying on a flat surface. And because this is going to be 9 inches, before we had the hydrobats, I had a 30 to 60% failure rate on all of my pie plates, because this is the desert and I cannot control dry times here. It sucks so bad, but it's part of the environment. You just got to work with it, right? Here we go. Slap that on there, make sure it's on. Okay, let's center. Gross. I like to throw clean. So nasty. I know it's clay and I should be happy because I've worked in clay, but I don't like this. Fundamentally is yeah. Alright, let's open this up and get to where we need to be. Remember, I'm going for a thick booty because these are going to go in the oven. They need thick booties. Alright, let's see. Let's test that. See, everything's sticking to me now. Perfect. I don't know if you can see. That's like, whatever that is. That is how deep I want it across the board. So we're going to open up just a little bit. Oh, that was just slop. Oh, sour cream. Ugh. I know some potters really rejoice in this sort of sloppy throwing medium, but I prefer clean water when I throw, so. Okay, so we're going to go nice and easy with my wooden rib. Across the surface here. Over, baby, over. 9 to 10 inches over. So much over. And we're gonna actually give a little bit of water because we're kind of having some troubles. Yeah, there we go. Slip makes water, not slip. Water makes everything better. All right, take my measure stick. We're well past 10, which means we're gonna actually pull it up. But don't worry about that. That's a future problem. Right now, we gotta compress this booty. I need this to be super duper strong. Okay, let's check our depths. Middle, perfect. Edge, perfect. Far edge, even better. Even better. All right, let's get rid of those holes that we just made. And let's make this pie plate level. It's not quite level yet. Okay, this is going to be the trick where we're going to use the wooden rib. I'm going to lift this plate up. Actually, we're going to slow that plate down. That plate is racing. Girl, you don't need to go that fast. Your plate. Now we're going to use our hands, our nasty, gross, slip-covered hands, to pull these plate walls up a little bit more. Now, in doing this and flipping it up like that, the plate is going to get weak. Well, not weak, sorry, tired from all the work I've been working it with. But I need to get under here for this foot to do some wet trimming, so I don't have to do a whole lot of dry trimming, right? There we go. And this is also so the plate or the pie cooks a little even. Okay, so now I'm going to just, now that I've got a nice little edge here and a little rim, I'm just gonna create my pie plate angle. And compress this rim because it's gonna get a lot of use. Perfecto. I'm in love with it. I'm having a good time here. Are you having a good time, little pie? Yeah, you can be a pie plate. You can make so many pies. Okay, let's just smooth out some throwing lines. Ugh, gross. And I think we're done. Look at that. Another really good pie plate. And let's go stamp these. Cornstarch, tappy tap 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 it in there. Look at a little sprinkle. I'm gonna gently move it around so it's in all the places I want and not touch the edge of my pie plate that is super, super wet. Okay, actually I'm gonna get a little bit more. I don't like how that's not covering well. Do 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 do. Fairy godmother. Ha ha ha. Bippy bobbity boo. Perfect. This way things don't stick. Okay, you have been poisoned right in the middle. So I don't push it down. I double check where it's gonna go and make sure it's kind of in the center. And then I'll give it a gentle rocking motion into the clay and a gentle rocking motion out of the clay. Oh, perfect. I love that. And then I check where my skull is and I kind of try and get it right there. Place it down before I push it down to make sure it's kind of in the middle. In der Mitte, as my German professor would have said. There we go. I'm gonna leave the cornstarch in here. It's not gonna affect the piece at all. And then, so don't scoop it out. You might just damage it if you try scooping it out. Just leave it, it's fine. I'm gonna leave these to dry. I'm going for maybe 5 or 6 hours, maybe overnight even. The problem is that these hydrobats will release the piece when it is ready. If you go and you pop this off too soon, it could fold in half like a taco, and that'll ruin it, right? And we spent all this time. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to go away. I'm going to cover it and go away, probably until tomorrow morning. Once it pops off, the only thing I'll need to do is stamp it with my signature and kind of run a wet sponge on the bottom just to get any goobers. And there's a little goober here on the rim, and just fix up anything that looks like an imperfection, and then literally it's going to just dry. A lot of people will wave their pie plates. I don't like that in my pies, and I'm very picky about pie, so we're doing it my way because that's what I like. And also, I'm not very good at doing the wavy part. I'm not confident in it, so I'm just not gonna do it. I like this where it's at, and when I reach the giggly side, the giggle part of finishing a piece, is when it's time for me to take my hands off of it. So we're gonna just let these dry, and then we'll come back when it's time to glaze. Look at all that pretty fall. Can we shut the lid or not? Oh my gosh, we can. I am on my way to a cemetery to go visit the grave of a murderer whom I related to. Goshen, Utah is very much still the wild, wild west. Like tumbleweeds and sagebrush and like wooden buildings. Like, let me show you. Literally, that's a tumbleweed going across the road. Just old stuff like this all over this town. I haven't seen one of these in forever. This is an old-timey telephone booth. They still have one out here. It's clearly not connected to anything. It's got spiders in it, but like, but see, it is, I mean, there's Sasquatch out there, but this is old-timey ranch vibes all over this place. I made it to the cemetery, and it is out in the middle of the boondocks. There is nothing here, and it's just so small, and there's cattle fencing all over, there's horses all over, but the cemetery has a listing of all the people buried here. So let's take a look. Alphabetical, which is super helpful. We are Bruce. We're looking for Bruce. Bruce. Okay. I can read. Okay, looks like no Bruce, but she married, so there is no one by the name of Annie Bruce buried in the cemetery. But I know that she married a man named Arthur Smith. And in the tradition of women under patriarchy, I'm sure she took her husband's last name. So let's look at Smith. R.S. Smith. S. Smith. Here we Where are the Smiths? There's a lot of Smiths. Oh, here we are. Annie and Arthur. I don't know what X means here. I probably should have looked. I think they're in 5A2178. Here's the grave map. And Annie should be 5A21, 7, and 8. Right there. And then that little circle means that there is a tree. So it should be easy to find. I am super bad at reading cemetery maps because I thought they were buried all the way over there. Turns out they're buried right over here. All right. So the story of Annie Smith is not a happy one, right? She was convicted of murdering her father with a strychnine-laced pie. It's so weird to be talking about this in a cemetery, you know. Oh. And it's so peaceful here, although there's a lot of dogs barking. It's a very interesting cemetery. Supposedly, according to the courts and the official documentation from the jail where she was housed, Annie was making some pies, and she had this thought like, oh, what would it be like to kill someone? And then she put strychnine-laced prunes, which are meant for killing rats in like barns and stuff back in the day, and she put those in the pie and sent the pie with her father. So Annie was convicted, and then at 21 she was exonerated, and the conviction was overturned. There was a bunch of people that signed a petition saying she didn't do it, and there's some controversy because the petition could have been like the petition could have been because it was the 1930s and people were like, women should not be imprisoned for murder, you know, for like this. Suspicion is that Annie took the fall for her mother, and because her mother knew that being so young and, you know, doing this as a minor, even though she was charged as an adult, but being a minor, she would likely get off. And she did, obviously. So the idea is that Annie's mother murdered her father, her husband, you know. I originally looked this up. Annie was listed as being buried in the Pioneer Goshen Cemetery, which I learned is not here, it's somewhere else. So I don't know if she was buried there and then moved, but I don't think she was, because I was looking at a lot of the graves. Her grave was really hard to find. I was looking at a lot of the other monuments and headstones, and they're all from about the same time. A lot of them are about the same time. I just want to be clear that I do not condone murder in any way. But it's just interesting that this is the skeleton in my closet. You know, this is my ancestor who murdered someone, and it's a family drama, and the official story doesn't seem to be the accurate story. There's a lot of hearsay, and we just don't have the official story. But if anyone does know where the official story is, I've looked. I've been making these pie plates for years, and I've actually, every time I make them, I kind of kept back into looking at Annie Bruce's life and what the truth might be. And it's never quite clear. The waters are very murky. So I'll list some sources down below, but if anybody knows anything, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to know more. I'd love one day to write a nonfiction novel about Annie Bruce and the court case. So, yeah, it's very interesting. Well, I will pay my respects to Annie and her husband Arthur, and then we will go forth and talk about pies and pie plates. It did take me an embarrassingly long time to find that headstone. I am clearly not that good at reading maps. Even it really does not get any more wild than this. I found the old Pioneer Cemetery, complete with tumbleweeds. This is the marker. Okay, so it does say after 1880, no new burials were made in the cemetery. The original Goshen Pioneer Cemetery is located 300 yards north of this monument in ground made sacred by the sacrifice of original and native pioneers and who gave their all for their faith. The following 18 men, women, and infants are buried herein. This is north. There it is, 300 yards north. That's the monument I was reading, so this is definitely a couple of miles different than the other graveyard, the current graveyard. One of the things I have always found sort of spooky and haunting about Utah is that it is very much a dystopian state. Like, Native Americans lived here, and then, you know, the Mormons came in and settled it, and basically it was an apocalypse for a long time, and now we're left with stuff that looks like this. We've got all of these places where they're just rusting farm equipment just hanging out in fields, and some fields are really well taken care of, but all of the fences are kind of moldering, moldy, dry stick fences. There's a very there is a massive dystopian vibe out here in the West, and especially in places between large cities, like where you find these tiny little towns that are nothing. They're not even a stop sign because they're so small. Like, they've got a church and 10 houses. It doesn't feel, I don't think the word is welcoming, I think the word is lonely. These places just feel that way. And this is like 40 minutes from the studio, so I'm glad the studio is an oasis in a literal desert like this. So, speaking of, I want to go back. Let's go to the studio. I want to close out this video by talking a little bit about visiting Annie Bruce's graveyard. It was a unique experience. I used to live next to a graveyard, and I would walk the graveyard, and there were all these ghost stories about the woman in white, right? And this graveyard was really peaceful. It was interesting. I couldn't read the graveyard map, so I had to like walk around a lot to find Annie's grave. And when I finally found them, I was so shocked. I was like, oh, they're actually here. And I was thinking that they were somewhere else, and I was in completely the wrong spot. And it was a nice little trip. It's interesting that Annie settled so close to where my family ended up settling, you know, immigrating into Utah at a totally different time after Annie's death. And it's interesting because Annie chose a guy named Smith, which, you know, Annie Smith is kind of a common name, so it hides her identity really well. And then she ends up just down the street, you know, 20 minutes away from where my family ends up in Utah. And it's interesting. It's very interesting. So, and where she ended up is so far removed from anyone. And I can't imagine that her past didn't haunt her and force her into literal hiding. The area where she ended up living, Payson, Goshen area in Utah, is, I mean, you saw some of the video, and that's in 2024. In the 1960s or 1950s or whenever she moved out there, it would have been desolate. And when I say desolate, I mean there maybe was like a few ranches, and there would have been maybe 10 buildings on a main street, and that was it in her town. And now it's quite a bit, you know, more built up, but back then it would have been very, very easy to disappear. So I don't know if I don't think that's an admission of guilt. I think that might just be her trying to live her life. And Idaho Falls is not that far from Afton, Wyoming, and the news would have followed her, but Payson is very, very far from either of those places. And I didn't even know that she was there, and I've been researching her for years, because when I started making these pie plates, family members would come up to me and be like, hey, you realize we have a history with pie that's dangerous? And I'm like, yeah, isn't that funny? And some of my family disagrees with me, and some of them think that's great. So I kind of think it's fun to have a skeleton in the closet and then just bring it out and be like, look at it dance, you know? And, you know, this is something that happened in the past. It's not something anybody can change. And I'm kind of one of those people who likes to embrace history rather than pretend it doesn't exist. I'm not going to just sweep the family history under the rug and be like, I hope it's better. And I'm like, we come from the Scots Bruces, you know, the Stuart Bruce line in Scotland, and before those family members began immigrating over to the US. And let me tell you about the crimes and political problems and drama that those people had, and there is no sweeping that under the rug. I mean, Robert the Bruce, he ended up going to France, and the French hated him so much that a bunch of people there cut out his heart and sent it back to his wife. And from my understanding, I don't think she was very upset about it. I think she was probably like, from what I understand, that she was like, yeah, he deserves that. And anyway, I went to the chapel where it was buried when I was in the UK, and it's a cute little chapel. It's from the chapel is also, it's the Rose Chapel, which is featured in the movie and the book by Dan Brown. So my family's history touches a lot of big history events and big literature events, and I'm like, I'm not interested in just sweeping this away. Let's do something with it, you know? So I make pottery about it. But thank you so much for following along. This has been an interesting family history journey that has to do with a joke, you know, poisoned pie plates. You have been poisoned, definitely a joke. I don't advocate for hurting anybody, but I think it's just fun. And I think it's fun to show and talk about. And I really like true crime. It's one of my passions. Last year, I think I was in the top 11% of Dateline listeners on Spotify. So yeah, I was pretty dedicated. So the book I'm going to recommend this week is a true crime novel, or the book is I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. And this book has its own story. It's the story about one woman's search for the Golden State. Michelle was connected somehow to the Golden State Killer, and the Golden State Killer / the Night Stalker, same person, did some very horrific things. So read with care. But Michelle went and spent decades trying to find the man who had committed all these crimes. And she was so close at the end of her life that and she was working with DNA reconstructionists, which, you know, DNA genealogists, to find his family, because if they could find his family, then they could find him. And that's exactly what happened. So DNA led to finding the Golden State Killer, and Michelle McNamara unfortunately died before he was discovered, but she was integral to the discovery process. And her story, she was writing it as she went, and she was almost done with the book before she died. And then someone else, I think it was Patton Oswalt, finished it for her, or helped finish it, which is really cool. And then Gillian Flynn was also involved in the project. There's just a lot of really big names in crime and thriller that are just associated with this novel and this book. On that note, I kind of wanted to float the idea of having like a book talk. I've recommended quite a few books, and I would love to discuss them with people, because a lot of my friends don't read what I read, and so I don't always have people to talk to these subjects or talk through these subjects about. And I love the chance to just discuss what people loved and about these works. So I'm thinking maybe November, so in about a month, November 2024, that we'll do a little roundtable discussion on like a Sunday or a Saturday or something. So I'll leave up a poll for a couple of weeks about when will be the best time, and I'm not sure where we'll do it, because I've never done anything like this before, so there might be some glitches. And I'll also send out a newsletter with more information about it, so if you want to join my newsletter, just go to the website. But thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, do all the things. It really does help the channel. Without further ado, let's take a look at the You Have Been Poisoned pie plates and other items that I made for this project. Enjoy. Ew, ew, ew. I hate this. Get off. It's so thick and gloppy, and I don't want it to be. Get off me. Ew. Blech.